Picture this scenario. You've spent time prepping for your team meeting, right? You're feeling pumped about the agenda and you're excited to just get your team on board with these new plans that you're gonna roll out, right? You're visualizing them looking inspired, contributing their own ideas, high-fiving, and then the meeting comes and you're the only one that's doing all the talking and it's like crickets. Have you ever been in a situation like this? I know I have, where I found myself actually wondering, does anyone on this team care? Did I just waste all my time here? And why does it feel so hard to motivate this team? So if you've ever struggled with a lack of motivation on your own team, or if you're feeling like you're just pushing mud uphill, then this video is for you. Because today we're gonna talk through determining the reason why your employees aren't motivated in the first place, because I gotta tell you, there's a handful of reasons. And I'll share a roadmap that will unlock their motivation so that you can get the results, performance, and the energy that you want to see. Now, let's start off with the reasons why your employees might not be motivated, right? Why there might be a general sense of lax as it relates to their work, right? You might even characterize it as just a lack of care. Now, the reason is actually twofold, meaning their lack of motivation is actually a combination of your own expectations around what things should look like, or even how you're managing them, coupled with their level of investment that they're bringing to their role. That's the truth, right? It's a combination of actually both parties. Now, Gallup did a study with thousands of employees and found that the top reasons why people disengage are the following reasons. Number one, they feel lost without a clear understanding of their role and how their work contributes to the bigger picture. Number two, they feel like they have little control over their work or decision-making process. Number three, they feel undervalued and unappreciated for their efforts or when they perceive unfairness in the workplace. Number four, they feel stagnant in their roles and like there aren't any opportunities to learn and advance. Now, I'm going to pause here for a second and ask you, how many of those things do you think you play a part in as a manager? Quite a bit, right? So given that this is the case, we got to get our head on straight as it pertains to the role that we play, right? We can't sit back and say, well, it's just this generation's work ethic. As a millennial myself, I can't tell you how many times I heard this when I first came into the workplace, right? That my generation just doesn't have a good work ethic. And now it's being passed on to the next generation where we're hearing the same thing being said about Gen Z, that they don't want to work. I feel like this statement is just so disempowering and doesn't adopt a posture of ownership, which I think is far more actionable. Now, yes, a fact of life is that some people just don't have a good work ethic. But the other fact of life is that managers also don't do a good enough job at setting up the agreements as it relates to how people should show up and what we define good work ethic to be. So the first part of the roadmap to improving motivation is checking yourself on whether or not you've been clear on the expectations and agreements. Because let me tell you, it starts at the top. And if you're not clear about what it looks like to be invested in work, then I can't blame them for not meeting a bar that has not been set. Now, I teach my students exactly how to do this within our program, the New Manager Accelerator, where we actually define what we call agreements to help elevate the team's approach to work. So if you want to learn how to do this effectively, a good first place for you to start like dipping your toe into this is with my free training at makitaandrews.com/training, and you can find the link in the description box below. Okay, so let's go back to the list that Gallup surfaced for us in terms of the reasons why people disengage, because we can actually use that list as a continuation of the roadmap. So we already stated that this number one stop that we got to make on that roadmap is setting agreements. So what's number two? Well, according to Gallup, one of the reasons for a lack of motivation is not having a clear understanding of the role and how their work contributes to the bigger picture. So what's the solution to that? Well, if someone is unclear, then it would be wise for you to give them clarity, right? So clearly define their role as well as their responsibilities. And then what you want to do is plug that into the company mission and goals, right? That way they feel a sense of being plugged in rather than feeling disconnected. And if you want help specifically with this in terms of setting goals, then you'll want to watch this video here. So the third thing that can actually cause a lack of motivation is team members feeling like they have little control over their work or decision-making processes. Now, I'm sure you can relate to this feeling too, right? This lack of motivation if you don't feel like you have any power over what you're doing. Now, yes, people want to have clarity, but they don't necessarily want to feel like cogs either. And so since that's the case, you want to be looking for opportunities to provide the right amount of autonomy and ownership to your team. Meaning you want to look for ways to give them freedom and flexibility within boundaries. So when you're delegating work, you want to communicate that in a way that transfers ownership rather than hoarding power. Fourth, right, Gallup said that disengagement also surfaces due to a feeling of being unappreciated. Again, something that we can all relate to. Yes, we're doing a job and we're getting paid to do the work, but there is still power and something like invigorating with hearing thank you, or I appreciate you, or great work. Right? So celebrate your team's successes, both the big stuff and the small stuff, and make sure that it's done in a genuine way so that people feel valued, seen, and heard. And if you sense that people are stagnating in their role, either because there is no room for advancement or the job itself has like a lot of monotony, don't just leave it at that, right? Get creative in investing in their development. How can you introduce challenge so that the individual stretches in their abilities? Or if there is room for advancement, can you introduce the career ladder or progression ladder that they can take that will motivate them to keep advancing? You know, sometimes we have to get a little creative and step out of our own comfort zones in order to make this work. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is that there are ebbs and flows in life, right? Sometimes a lack of motivation comes from also personal problems, all right? Has nothing to do with the work itself. I've been there, we've all been there, where life is just lifing and you can't concentrate and show up as your best self. So knowing that that's the fact of life, like, can you give them some grace? Now, at the top of this video, I mentioned that motivation is really a combination of how you're approaching things and the person. And so far, we've addressed your approach because that's what we actually have control over. But if it is the individual, then even at that, you have more control of the situation than you think. And it requires you assessing whether or not it makes sense for that person to continue being on the team. And if you suspect that that's the case, then I want you to watch this video here next.